you guys want to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your work? You want to start with Terri?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I'm Terri Nelson, and I am part of Helioscope Studio. We used to be Periscope Studio in downtown Portland. There's about 25 of us, maybe more. And it's writers, comic book artists, all different types of artists. And we draw for both, I don't know, I call them cape books, but we draw for superhero books like Marvel and DC Comics. We also draw for ourselves. We do independent books where we do our own projects. And so I'm here because I'm talking about one of my own projects, which is that the National Science Foundation sent me down to live in the Antarctic for an entire season, which is an austral summer. So it would have been wintertime up here. I was down at the very bottom of the planet in the ice and snow. And so I was there for 6 months. The sun never goes down in that time period, not up until really the point that you're about to leave. And I ended up doing all kinds of interesting things. I learned to pilot a Zodiac over icy, the waters are covered in ice, and the ice changes throughout the seasons. So I learned to pilot a Zodiac over ice. I spent a lot of time around penguins, living and dead, a lot of time doing all kinds of bizarre adventures. So that's what I'm going to be illustrating.
Okay, and that's the pictures, the prints and stuff that you
That's the prints are all prints that of paintings that I did while I was down there. That if you go up to my table, you'll see them. And so those are watercolors, but because I was in 20 below weather and I did them outside, wearing 3 sets of gloves, the water would freeze in my water brush, and the paint would turn weird. So I ended up using alcohol, which doesn't freeze until it has a much lower freezing point than 15 or 20 below. So I could actually paint outside as long as I used that instead of water. So that's what those are upstairs. And I also have field sketchbooks of everything that I drew. A lot of it I drew outside in the elements. So you can come when we're done here, you can come and take a look.
Is that out now, or?
No, I'm working on it right now.
Working on it?
Yeah.
When do you expect it to come out?
Probably, with any luck, I'm hoping to have something. I'll have it completed by the end of this year. I need to get a book agent and get going with the publishing end of it.
Well, that sounds really interesting.
Good. I hope so. I hope it's interesting.
I would read it.
Okay.
I'm Adam Watson. I own Darkslinger Comics. I'm the creator/writer of Ghost Assassin, El Bovine Muerte, Chronicles Von Helsing, Diary of a Dead Man, The Pauper, Who Will Save the World, probably a few other titles that I'm not thinking of at the moment. I did not go to Antarctica.
It's hard to talk
But one of my artists did live there. Tony Morgan, who you may know.
I don't.
You know
think I
Lucas Kettner, your studio
Yeah, I know
mate?
Lucas.
Yeah, it's one of them.
Okay.
Right.
He lived in the Antarctic. Do you know which station?
I don't. I know long before he became one of my artists, though, he lived down there.
Okay, I'll bug Lucas because he's never mentioned that. But
He may not know. Tony doesn't talk about it like it's an interesting thing.
okay.
So.
It's a really interesting thing.
I think it is,
Not
yeah.
that many people. You might be the only person I've ever met that's been to Antarctica. So.
There are quite a few people go to. There are 3 stations.
Mm-hmm.
I was at the smallest one. There's only 42 people at any point in time at Palmer. And McMurdo is, if he was living down there, I bet he was probably at McMurdo, which is the great big one. And that's basically a city.
It's like being on another planet. Almost,
It is.
You know, where you have like stations and stuff.
Yeah, it's very much like being on another planet. You can get lost if you go outside and not come back again.
Oh wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I'm Justin Rueff. I draw and write and color Brother Crow comic. 2 issues are out right now. I'm drawing the 3rd one currently. And I also paint. I'm a muralist, artist. I've done work for the Light Opera of Portland, set design. I like working really big. I like painting big things. And I kind of just approach everything as like artistic challenges. I don't really have a career path that says I do this one kind of thing. I'm always looking for the next big different thing to do. And I work 3 days a week for New Seasons, painting signs for them. I paint food labels and signage that goes up in the store. So I get my health benefits and all of that stuff by having a regular retail job. And then
I always wondered who did those. Like,
Yeah.
how, do they have somebody who works here who does those, or
Yep.
because they're always so really artistic.
It's me.
and stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Even the one here in Orenco, or
That's the one that I do. That's my store.
Oh,
So all the signs you see at Orenco,
Okay.
that's all my stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
And I also do some work with Epsiode to the People and Tan. Like I've done some label stuff for some of the food stuff, which I love working with food people. I love working with food people. I love working with musicians, and I love working in comics. Like people who just basically want to like let you go crazy with your art.
And they're really passionate about what they do, and they want to let you do what you do.
Yeah.
Kind of like.
And people who hire me, they see like what my voice is. So I don't really get a lot of jobs doing like these like wedding chalkboard things because that's not the kind of artist I am. So I'm at a point now where people who they know what they're getting when they hire me. So I don't know how most people approach their artistic career, but my philosophy is just like 100% completely get behind your own voice and just go with it. Just push your own voice. Rather, it's like I've got my own artistic heroes, but I lean on my intuition a lot.
Right. Does anybody have any questions? If not, I'll start my questions. Okay. So when in your life did you decide that you wanted to do comics or art or graphic novels or write for your career?
Which one of us do you want to start?
Anyone, any order, anyhow?
Probably when I was about 5,
That early?
5, 6, yeah, something like that. Yeah, but I wanted to be an artist back then.
Right.
So I drew G.I. Joe comics and later Ninja Turtle comics and all that all the time. But when I was 17, I got in an accident that completely shattered my wrist, and I had to have it reconstructed. So I can't actually hold a pencil correctly for any long period of time anymore. So that ruined that dream for quite a few years. And then when I was 22, I believe, I decided to take a stab at writing instead.
Okay.
So never fully gave up on the idea of working in comics.
Right, you shifted into another.
Yeah, and it just kind of hibernated for a while and it
Yeah.
became something else.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's kind of key to being able to be a working artist, is to be able to be flexible
right.
and to change as need be.
Yeah.
Yeah, flexibility is key.
I had surgery on this shoulder last year and ended up not being able to use this hand, which is my dominant hand, for about 6 months. So I taught myself to draw with my left hand, which is not that uncommon. My other studio mates have also done that because our livelihood depends on
Yeah.
Right.
a functioning hand. So
Yeah, I can't even sign my name with my left hand. Like, I'm so untalented with my left hand. It's
Well,
ridiculous.
yeah, if you do it for a while, though, then it gradually gets better.
Right.
It's just weird.
It's like a strength you have to build up.
Yeah.
in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that and that's part of like for me, what like working big
Uh-huh.
is like, because you're using, it's not
Yeah.
like it takes longer. It's just a different muscle group. So it's like I love having like a variety, because I can feel it in my body if I'm working on
That
something
is going to
for
blow your
2
shoulder.
hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So it's like I gotta have like variety, and then I've got like chin-up bar in my house that like sometimes I just sit there and hang.
Yeah, that's good for the shoulder and neck.
Yeah.
So which is probably what you're.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can feel it all
Yeah.
tightening up, and I'm like, I'm gonna be an old man like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so do you want to answer it, Terry? When you knew?
Oh, I didn't answer that, did I?
Yeah.
I have always drawn, even when I was a tiny child. So I am personally of the opinion that nobody is born with a talent, and that it's just that it's the thing that you like doing the most that you concentrate on, and that you do the most that ends up being the thing that you have, that you're the best at. So for me, I wasn't interested in anything else but drawing, which has been a problem sometimes. But so it just meant that I drew so much that I eventually I'm now good enough that people look at my work and say, "Oh, you're so talented," and I'm always like, "No, I did so much work."
It's skill, not
Yeah.
talent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great answer, and it's a good thing for young people to hear, I think, that, whatever your focus is on, that's what you're gonna, develop.
That's what you'll accomplish. Yeah.
Okay, so who has been the biggest influence on you outside the comic industry, and how did they affect your life?
In my case, Rien Poortvliet, who was a Dutch wildlife artist. He illustrated the Gnomes book. It's the thing that he was the most famous for. But what he actually was a really avid hunter and a really good wildlife artist. And so he did a whole bunch of other books, some of which never got translated into English, besides the Gnome book. But that's the one that everybody knows about.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a super fun book if you haven't seen it before. I bet the library probably has
We
it.
have it. I
Do
mean,
you?
I don't know if we have it at this branch, but it's definitely in the system.
It's totally fun. Yeah.
It is. Agreed.
So that's probably my main influence, but in comics itself,
Or outside of comics, or even outside of illustration, like outside maybe of what you do, like another influence that you have.
let's see. I am always looking for women who've done things that is incredible things that we aren't necessarily encouraged to do.
That's how we found you, because basically, we had someone else, and she canceled, and we're like, we really wanted a woman on the graphics novel now. And I think we contacted Words with Pictures, and they sent us a whole bunch. And the person that's doing the main organizer, Jessica, she has a PhD in chemistry, and she's really into science. And when she saw yours, she was like, I feel like this person's my soulmate. You should try and get her. So that's how that happened.
Yay!
We wanted to have like a female presence on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a whole push to get women into STEM, science things, and
Yeah.
so I'm glad that I'm helping do what I can to get girls interested in
Right.
things. But I would say that one of my influences was Jane Goodall from
Okay.
the time I was a tiny child, because amazing woman working with chimps and living in the wild in
Yes.
Africa, and
So amazing.
she's still alive and she's still amazing. So
Yeah, she came and did a talk when my daughter was in high school at Epsiode University, and my daughter was like, the whole umbrella. And I'm like, that's actually cool. I can tell that story to everyone who listens. So.
yeah, that's somebody I would be starstruck to meet. Yeah.
So.
Did you say influence or inspiration?
Okay, it says influence, but I'll take inspiration outside of the comics industry.
Okay, well, outside of influence, probably oddly enough, either Johnny Cash or Eminem,
Okay.
because they can both tell
Way over here, way over
a
here.
full-length story in like 2 minutes that paints a perfect picture. Bob Dylan can also do that, but he usually goes for like 10 or 20 minutes. So yeah, probably like one of those musical influences actually. And comics is short form storytelling, so music is actually very relatable, as you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reason he says that is because a lot of my art is very heavily influenced by music, and also by, I grew up Mexican Catholic, and so my family had a lot of this like spiritual iconography around the house, and I see those color palettes all the time, even if I'm not intentionally doing it. It comes into my artwork all the time, and I absolutely love Frida Kahlo. Like anything in that color temperature just totally lights me up. Like I get excited about that kind of stuff. I tend to work a little bit more pastel-y than that, but a lot of the pop artists, I like very clean images. I like sometimes when I sit down to write a comic book, I think about it in terms of like almost like writing IKEA instructions. Like, how do I diagram this thought concept into a way that's going to be digestible by the consumer? And also to, put my own design aesthetic in it as well. But I do try to incorporate a lot of those like spiritual clues into my artwork, so that even if somebody doesn't know that they're getting that level of understanding from it, it's in there.
too, and it's like, until you bring like your Protestant friend with you to mass, you don't realize how, you're just so used to seeing these images and having them all around you, and they're just so ingrained in your psyche, and then your friend's like, this is kind of weird. I'm used to it, so.
Yeah.
All right, so anybody else have any questions, or we just keep going? All right, so what do you do to recharge your creative batteries? So if you're kind of feeling like you're out of juice.
I'm part of a big studio, so when I'm out of juice, I usually have 24 other people making fun of me until I keep going. But it does mean that I can look at their work. They're all incredible artists or writers, and so I can look at their work. I take in as much information as you can from around you, other people's work too, and that will influence you and maybe send you off in a direction that you weren't thinking about necessarily.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like when I'm at home painting, I put on Twitch all the time, and I'll have people who paint up on my computer, so I'm watching them paint while I'm painting, or even if it's not the same. Like, I love being around other creative people when I'm working. This whole idea of like recharging my battery, like you don't understand. If I take a day off, I have the worst self-talk. Like, I'm just like, what am I doing with my time on this planet? Like, I need to. So it's like I get up at 8 in the morning, 9 in the morning, and it's like here's my routine. I get up, make my coffee, read a comic book, drink my coffee, straight to work, like every single day.
And you work from your home?
And I work from my home. And if I miss a day, I don't feel right. It's like, I hear that this happens with working out, that like once you get in, like once you break the seal into like, you're in the regimen of like going to the gym, you start to miss it if you don't go, if you feel it in your body if you don't go. I feel it in my whole soul if I'm not.
So you created that habit though?
Absolutely. Like I definitely feel like there was a point in my career where it took effort to start working for the day, but it is 100% like just ingrained in me. But the same thing you were saying is like, I love seeing, like even if I'm not watching other people paint, I go on YouTube and I listen to people like making beats or doing like, I like very like rhythmic things that it isn't super distracting. So like I'll just have people building beats on in the background just to have like creative energy kind of moving in the house.
That's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, YouTube's great. I will watch artists who do stuff that nothing like what I do. I love watching ceramicists, like people like throwing pots and things like that. It's super soothing, and it's also, I don't know, there's something that's kind of inspirational about watching other people do something that they're really, really good at that I can't do.
Yeah, absolutely. All the time. Woodworking,
Yeah.
metalsmithing, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. So what about you?
I have kind of a weird process to recharge my batteries.
Okay.
I'll either just start working on something different, because sometimes the problem is I'm just not seeing what it is in this story, so I might just move on to the next one. I keep like 42 journals at a time for that purpose. But I do a lot of method writing. So like if I'm working on Principalities, which is my story about angels, and I'm stagnant, I might put the extension ladder on the outside of my house and go up on the roof and sit up there for a while. Or one of my stories, I need a lot of claustrophobia because it deals with death and loneliness and sadness. And so I have a coffin that I'll lay in.
You what?
I have a coffin that I'll lay in.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, I had to give it to my cousin because my girlfriend didn't like it. But but before that, yeah, I would lay in my coffin.
Okay.
Yeah, it works.
You win.
That's a lot more exciting than a YouTube video.
Yeah, you should stream that.
Wouldn't it be very interesting?
I love it. So I really like how Justin just broke down his routine. So can you guys do what he did, like wake up, get my coffee? So what about you guys?
I own 3 businesses and have 5 kids. So my routine is basically just work whenever I can, when I can. And I'm always working on something, but it's not always something creative. So it might be something business-wise with Darkslinger, but it might also be one of my other businesses. So I don't have any sort of set creative routine whatsoever.
Okay, I have a set creative routine, but It's get up in the morning, drink coffee, look at the computer until I feel like my soul is melting because of social media, and then go downtown and go to the studio, which is great because my studio it's a collective of about 25 of us. We don't work for the studio. We all pay a small amount of rent so that we can rent like a big office space. And so I can go down there and not lose my mind at home or screw around and not do my work. Because if you're not doing your work at the studio, other people notice and make fun of you for it. And so that does keep you kind of on track. When I'm at home, though, I will go upstairs and I have, it depends on what I'm working on. If I'm writing, I have to have quiet.
Yeah.
If there's people talking around me, I'll end up accidentally typing what they're saying. So that I'll do from home quite a lot. Once I have a script written, then I'll thumbnail it, which means, do people know what thumbnailing is? You do? Okay. So for the people that don't know what it is, it's I'll break the script down into tiny, tiny little drawings about the size of a thumbnail, which is why they're called that, so that I can try and see if the action that I'm plotting out is easy to read, even when it's tiny. Because if I can read it when it's tiny, then I can read it when it's bigger. So I will have a week where I am writing a script, a week where I'm thumbnailing, and then I can go into the studio once my thumbnails are done, and I can do my penciling and my inking. Because I'm also a commercial artist, I work on that stuff generally at the studio too, because I do I work both traditional media, meaning like watercolor and colored pencils and pencils. And I also work digitally, which means that I use, I've used Photoshop, but what I've been using a lot lately is Manga Studio.
That's what I use.
Yeah, it's cheap.
Yeah.
You can get really good brushes. I get brushes from a guy named Frendon that are digital brushes that he creates. And I use those within Manga Studio, and I can plot out an entire book. And then the nice thing about doing it digitally is that I have endless undo. It's like being able to erase forever. And the problem that I find working digitally is that because of that ability to erase forever, you have to really decide, no, I'm done now.
Yeah.
I have to move on. Because you can just keep fixing something till the end of time and never actually finish the project.
I actually, I've moved more away from digital just because for kind of that, I just feel that satisfaction so much sooner when I'm working in traditional. When I mean, first of all, there's very little you can do about it, especially after you've inked a page, you know.
Yeah.
But it's digital, I can go back and forth forever. Yeah.
It's never good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and it's always just move the eyes, that looks right, and then you're kind of resculpting the face. And for me, if I spend too much time resculpting a head shape or something, I get so far away from that original sketch. And sometimes I just feel like I was the closest I was ever going to be right at the beginning, and I've spent so much time moving away from it.
One thing I find helpful is to watch somebody else read a comic that I drew,
Mm-hmm.
is how fast they flip through it. And then I realize that all that time I spent agonizing about whether that hand looked exactly correct, they don't care.
Yeah. I always think 10 minutes to read, 6 months to make.
Exactly, yeah.
So when you do your thumbnails, how locked in are you on the script?
I'm locked in on the script. Especially because lots of times the script isn't something that I've written if I'm doing it for the studio itself.
Yeah.
I can't deviate from the script. It has to be, a writer wrote that script, the editor has edited that script. I have very little say.
Okay.
I can occasionally say things like, I once got a script that called for a guy who'd been knocked unconscious in a fight, who was lying on the ground with his eyes closed, and it said, his eyes moved backwards and forwards rapidly.
Yeah.
And I was like, which is it, you guys? You can only pick one because comics.
Yeah.
It's not a movie.
Yeah.
So you get small amounts of say like that.
Yeah.
When it's my own thumbnails, again, I have to do the same thing where I'm like, no, you're done, move on.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I can keep modifying my own script until I never get anything done.
Do you
ever.
enjoy thumbnailing?
I hate it.
That's my favorite part.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I hate inking.
You want to thumbnail my stuff?
Sure. Let's talk.
So what tools what do you use to do thumbnails? Is that
Pencil.
Pencil and paper.
Very
Yeah.
fine,
Yeah.
like tiny.
No, it's a number 2 pencil and a piece of binder paper.
And then, but you're doing it very small
Yeah.
picture, right?
Yeah, I just draw little tiny squares, and I have to draw like little stick figures, and it's very simplified for the
Okay.
thumbnails. But it's a way for me to say, oh, okay, actually, if I have these 2 people facing this direction in this one panel, and in the next scene, I have moved, I always call it the camera, which is the vision of the viewer. If I've moved that camera around, and now I've got those people swapping sides talking, it doesn't make sense to the viewer necessarily, so I have to figure that out. Or another thing is I have to leave room for dialogue. Dialogue always reads right to left, because in English anyway, because that's the way we read. So in my thumbnails, I can look at it and say, oh my, I didn't leave, this is like a really dialogue heavy panel, I didn't leave enough room for dialogue, and also my action is running in the wrong direction, and I have to figure out how to switch this.
That's a big problem with artists too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you want the art to kind of like lead the person through the page in the right path.
Yeah,
Like,
and a great comic book reading experience that's flawless, and it doesn't take you out of the
So
story.
if you're
because
just
you
a
have-
writer, learn how to letter.
Yeah, because you have to figure out where it is, because where you thought it was going, they changed where the bubble is or something like
Yeah.
that, and then you have to figure it out, and it takes you out of the story.
but I mean, I think for me, that's the thing that I like about thumbnailing. Like, I like puzzles. I like those
It is a
kind of
puzzle.
like challenges.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, and it's also like being like a movie director. You're like
Yeah.
taking those camera shots, and you're like, and there's no budget, so it's like I want to zoom out from like the planet Mars and just keep getting closer and closer to this kid's backyard, and you like anything is available for you, which can be crippling for people who can't make a choice.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I get asked a lot about my scientific illustration end of things, is that people are like, well, why do people need you? Can't you just go take a photo? And the thing is that I can draw stuff that doesn't exist. So, for instance, I was sent down to study snowy sheathbills, which is, I could talk about them for hours, but don't worry about it. You can talk to me at my table about them. They're a weird little bird, and I was supposed to draw their chicks, and the chicks at the station while I was there, one hatched and died. And I needed to draw a story in which they were living. So, because I'm an artist and I can draw things that I can visualize, I was able to draw a living chick, even though I never saw one go all the way through the lifespan, by talking to other people and finding out what their actions would look like, what they would look like at various life stages. So if you'd send a photographer down, he'd be stuck with a bunch of photos of a dead chick, and that doesn't make a good story. It didn't fit the story that I was supposed to illustrate. That has nothing to do with the question that you
Oh,
asked.
I know, but I love it when that's great. That's kind of panels when they kind of just go off on. So you mentioned Manga Studio and digital brushes. What other tools do you use to create your work? And Adam, this includes you. Like, what do you use physically? You know,
A journal and a
A
pen.
journal.
Yeah.
Okay. What kind of journal?
I have one with Robin on it, one with Batman on it. I have a Game of Thrones one. I have a leather one. I have one from some sort of weird parchment paper that came from Iraq. I have, I don't know. I have one that's a Garden State promo one. I don't know where I got that one. But it's really cool. It's like this big leather one.
Specific pins or?
Yeah, actually, depending on the type of story I'm writing. If I'm writing something like dark and really heavy, I want actually a heavy pen. And if it's needs to be light and comedic, then I like just a cheap throwaway Bic pen.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm very methodical about that kind of stuff. I don't know
Okay.
why. So,
Whatever works.
yeah. But besides that, you know, like Photoshop, Illustrator, I'm not an artist like they are, but I can do minor graphic design elements and I can letter. So I do those things with those programs.
Okay.
And I have Manga Studios, but I don't know how to use it.
Maybe next year.
Maybe.
You have a Manga Studio tutorial, and you guys.
It's pretty cool. If you know how to use Photoshop, you have all the knowledge
Okay.
you need to use Manga Studio. Do you feel like that's accurate?
Yeah, it's accurate, but it's frustrating at first because it's a Japanese program, and
Yeah,
so
and there's certain things that are,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just learning where it's
yeah,
at, though.
exactly. I don't use anything special for sketching. I use a number 2 pencil and whatever paper happens to be there for thumbnailing. When I am drawing a traditional comics page, I use Bristol paper, which is a heavy paper. I use a vellum surface usually. Sometimes I use plate, but the ink doesn't necessarily sink in on plate. That means vellum is a little bit textured, plate means it's smooth. When I'm inking, I use a Winsor Newton Series 7 number 2 sable brush. That is the only brush that I use. That's the only brush that almost everybody in my studio uses. It's a Kolinsky sable brush, which means that it's a very expensive brush for what it is. It's just the very tip of a particular type of weasel's tail. But it's really springy, and it works really well for inking. And I use Rapidograph quick dry ink for inking because I will drag my hand across wet ink and mess it up. But I use a brush and just India ink for inking when I'm doing something traditional.
That's pretty specific, so.
It's very specific. We have interns who come through the studio a lot, and every once in a while somebody will come in and they'll have bought, or their parents have bought, a $700 set of brushes, and I'm like, you need one, honey.
Yeah.
You're never going to use the one that costs so much money that's this big around.
Yeah.
So, I also use water brushes a lot, which you can get at you can get them at Fred Meyer. They're like the Pentel Aquash brushes, and you fill up the body of the brush with water, and the brush itself has a little like acrylic tip, and they're cheap.
Yeah.
And I will dilute ink down with some water and use those for gray tones. Or I can fill the brush itself up with ink and use that to ink. And I used those filled with vodka when I was painting in the Antarctic.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
So great.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I use just a number 2 pencil. I draw, so I tend to draw, I even brought these two to kind of show you. Like all of my pencils, I just do them straight onto like newsprint, paper, whatever is available. And then, and this is probably going to seem so obvious to people, but like for the longest time I was drawing a full page and then taking like a big old sheet of Bristol and then like copying an entire page until I saw some other artists do this, and it just seems so obvious, is that he just does the panels in strips, right? So now that's what I do, is that I just do the panels in strips, and it's a lot easier to be like, to like switch out, like if you don't like the way a panel's going, to just redraw it over it. So I do all on my pencils, I draw big, I draw on newsprint, and I just get out a light table, and when I do my inking, I just ink onto the Bristol paper over my pencil sketches. I don't bother with the blue non-photo thing anymore. Everything's just number 2 pencil.
Yeah, sometimes I'll do the non-repro boot. So people want to buy originals, and when you worked entirely digitally, you don't have an original that you can sell them, at least not in their minds.
Yeah.
So sometimes I will purposely do an original page, and I will use the non-repro blue, and I will ink it, and then people feel like they've gotten an original. Even though I did exactly the same amount of work for something digital, it's just that they don't have the physical object in their hands, so they don't think it's an original.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've tried printing out digital copies of things, and
Yeah.
they're like, oh, the computer did that for you. No, it didn't.
Yeah. It was involved, but the pencil doesn't do it for you.
No.
And I use Manga Studio too. And the thing that, one of the things that's, so Photoshop, for anybody who uses this subscription service, you got to pay $10 a month minimum. I think it's $20 a month maybe.
Yeah.
To keep Photoshop. So there's no like purchase price. Whereas Manga Studio is like $60, $50.
And it goes on sale all the time for
Yeah.
like 40.
So it's like a one-time purchase, and then you just have the program.
I found it for 50 cents at a garage sale.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
deal of the century.
Yeah.
The expensive part about using Manga Studio is that you have to have either a drawing tablet or an iPad, or I use a Cintiq, a Wacom Cintiq, So that's the expensive part of it, is that,
Yeah, and so I've got like the Wacom that like I'm drawing here, but I'm looking at the screen up here, which I still don't think my brain has entirely made that 90-degree turn. So like that's the next big purchase is like I just want to be able to draw directly onto what I'm looking at.
yes, yeah. And it's getting easier and easier to do that on tablets these days. So you don't
Yeah,
have
I've
to,
heard good things about people just using like an iPad or something like
yeah,
that.
or Surface,
Mhm.
the Surface Pro. Yeah, I don't know, that,
Yeah, that's good answers.
okay.
Okay, so what element of your work gives you the most personal satisfaction?
I just like seeing kids when they like when you know you've got somebody. For me, that's like if it's a painting or the comic or whatever. The second where I can like whether even if they don't buy it, like the just knowing that they like that's for me that's what the whole thing is.
Like
It's
when
like
they're walking past and they engage with your work.
well, they
which
just
is
I mean
the-
I was so I was at Rose City last week and this lady came up and she's like you are just like a beacon of light and she was just so into everything that I'm here for you.
Yeah, right. Yes, we don't like to be told.
That actually
Yeah.
makes me uncomfortable when I hear that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You don't like it as much?
I don't like accolades very much. For me, it's just a collaboration element. Like when I've sent a script to somebody and I start to get the pages back and they show me how they interpreted what I've written, that's the part
That's
that,
cool.
you know,
I can imagine.
that gets me going the most.
Yeah, that would be satisfying.
I would say it's the paycheck.
Okay, well,
It's honest.
honesty, yeah.
No, I mean, I like it when I've completed something, and I feel like I have a brief period of time where will complete something and I'm happy with what I did, and then I hate it. And all I can see is everything that I did that I would change or do better, and then I hate that piece, and I put it away, and when I pull it out again 6 months later, I'm like, wow, I'm really good.
But you needed that distance.
Yes, but initially I hate my draw. I have 15 minutes when I'm done with something before I decide I hate it.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
And it feels like that time period has been getting more and more rapid as I get older. But again, if I put the drawing away and I don't look at it for a while and I forget what vision I had in my mind that nobody else can see, when I pull it out again later on, then it's usually fine.
But, you know, in regards to the paycheck, it must be satisfying to be able to have this as your career. It's also your passion and what you love to do, and you're able to.
And let's be honest, it's the only thing I'm good at.
Yeah, well, you know, it still must be somewhat satisfying.
It is. It's the very first time that you ever get paid to be a professional artist is amazing, and it doesn't seem real. But it also seems like, oh, now I finally made it because I have this usually tiny paycheck for my first job.
But you still have it.
Yeah,
know, so
yeah. But
Definitely.
it means that other people saw value in your work. So, and it also means that you get to live indoors for a little while
Yeah.
longer and eat food.
I think for me it was like the first time I had somebody else paying a lot of money for my supplies, like to get like this giant box of paints, and I was just like, I didn't have to pay for that. Like, that was a pretty good feeling.
So what would you tell, like someone who's a newcomer that had the same passion and wanted to start making the paychecks for doing their art or their writing, or go into comics or illustration, or?
Can I be blunt and honest? I would say don't spend a lot of money on art school because you can never get out of that debt, and it will take you a very, very long time to make enough money to even start paying down the debt on your tuition. And right now, you can't go bankrupt and get out of that debt. So I have all kinds of interns who come through my studio who spent tons and tons or their parents spent tons and tons of money to get them all the way through art school, when the reality is, if you're very good, you will be very good whether or not you went through art school, and it's better to just start working and to find professionals that you can talk to. Comic-Cons are really good for bringing your work to and having a professional look at your work and do a portfolio review. And if you listen to them and to their criticism, and you go off and try honestly to do some of the things they suggest, you will get better. Paying a lot of money for a degree doesn't necessarily make you good. Work makes you good. And you have to put in the time.
That's great advice.
It's excellent advice.
Yeah, it's absolutely the practice. I mean, when I started painting signs, that was like, that's really how I got into that regimen of working every single day. And now I cannot, like, I don't have weekends anymore because it's like I have to work every single day. Like, I feel internally I have to work every single day. But I dropped out of art school because I started working. And I saw, like, my friends now who've graduated from art school, and some of them have jobs making art, but they're all in debt. I would say that if somebody wants to like get into making comics, that like those boundaries between you and having a finished book, those are all created by your mind.
Yeah.
Like, sit down with some paper. 22 pages isn't a lot, you know. Like, put it out there, make it happen.
Do the work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do the work. Yeah.
Research.
Research.
Yeah. Go hit up back issue bins at cons, find Comic Book Journal, Wizard magazine even, or comic interview magazines, Right Now, Draw, all those things. Go to YouTube, look up interviews with Jeff Smith, Will Eisner, whoever.
Yeah.
And, you know, panels like this, podcasts, all that. Listen to all of it and listen to the business elements.
Yes.
Because if you don't learn
Yeah.
the business elements, you're not going to know what a contract looks like. You're not going to know what you should be getting paid, what your rights are as a creator, any of that kind of stuff. And not every single person that you meet in this industry is going to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunate fact.
Yeah.
Whether you're a publisher, a writer, an artist, doesn't matter. You're
Yeah.
going to come across some scandalous people. But
know how to read a contract.
know how to read a contract, but learn everything about the industry. If you think the whole entire comic industry is what's been happening in the last 6 months, you don't know anything about the comic industry.
Yeah. I had another thought which kind of ties into that, which is don't limit your influences to people who are exactly your age and what they're doing right now. You should look at people who came years and years and years before you. There's all kinds of, everybody learns from each other and draws influence from each other. And if you decide that they're uncool because they're old or it's stuff that nobody looks at anymore, you're going to end up not basically cheating yourself out of a lot of learning from people that came before you.
I was talking to an artist who was telling me that she was getting off of Instagram because she could feel the pull towards likes kind of dominating her creative output over like, boy, I really need to focus on textures in my, you know, in my line work or something, like this, I don't know, this instant like gratification for artwork. And like to me, so it's like I'm drawing my third issue right now, and I can see, when I look at my books, all I see is like the flaws and the faults and things that are wrong with it. And so it's like each book that I put out, I can identify pretty quickly that area where I need to put all of my focus into. It's like, you know, like I want more black on the page from now on. And so like that kind of becomes like each issue that I do, I'm kind of looking at that area where like, I guess the advice part of it would be like not to avoid your weaknesses, but to meet them head on, you know? Yeah.
And one thing I notice when we have interns coming through is the ones who learn things are able to take critique. They're able to take somebody telling them that you know, this is not perfect, you need to.
Yeah, you got to really detach your ego and just.
And it's super hard to do. The ones who come in and say, no, what I was trying to do, you don't understand what I was trying for here.
It doesn't matter what you're trying to do. It matters what you did do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't like getting positive critiques a lot of times. I got positively reviewed by Fangoria. It made me feel weird. Instead of happy.
Do you rather get the critique or?
Yeah, I don't know, when somebody's saying nice things about my work, it makes me feel weird. Same reason she was saying earlier is because you hate your own work more than, you're
Yeah.
capable of hating anything anyone else has ever produced.
Exactly.
And I had one of my books talked about on a podcast, and the way that they were talking about it, they were engaging with the work in the way that I felt like people should be engaging with the work. Like, to me, it's like, I don't need you to say that you like it or you don't like it, but I want to hear that you were on the other side of the conversation that I was trying to initiate with you. And to me, like, that's the thing that I'm going for. It's like I'm putting these ideas into the world because these are things that I want other people to think about.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's something else in here in about 10 minutes, so is there any questions that anyone has right now before we wrap things up?
You're talking about looking to the older generations.
Mm-hmm.
What about looking to the people who are in the generations younger than you are?
I don't think you have a choice. You can't avoid the generations younger than you.
No.
I nip it on your heels.
Yeah.
2 out of 5 of my kids want to be comic creators.
We tend to either look back or mostly look to people who are doing sort of what you're doing.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a pretty big gap between some of the traditional poetry people and people coming in who are very skillful at their own. So it's difficult to make that bridge in that field.
Well, comics is traditionally a young person's medium. The readers are young.
True.
With the advent of social media, if you almost have to be online in order to promote your work. But it does mean that you get a constant barrage of people who are younger than you and in a lot of cases better than you, just in your face all day long. It's not something that you can easily avoid. You'd have to actively not go online and actively not talk to young people at cons and things like that to avoid seeing.
You're exposed to a lot of young people in your life.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll probably wrap this up, but thank you guys. You did an excellent job. It was really interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you so much.
I'll be seeing Adam again in about an hour.
Yeah, I'll be back here in an hour for another talk. So.
Okay.